Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tradesman Experience. This is the podcast built by tradesmen for tradesmen. My name is Josh, and in the virtual studio this week is a gentleman by the name of Heath Treasure. Now, you're going to get to hear kind of a roller coaster journey that this gentleman has went through, from making millions to losing everything to rebuilding an empire. And then we kind of talk about the opportunity of today and the future of buying, fixing, scaling, and selling businesses. That's what Heath does now. He is a serial entrepreneur. He is one of the people leading this movement of acquiring businesses and acquiring blue-collar businesses. He is a blue-collar guy. He has pretty fascinating story to share with us, and I hope you get as much out of this conversation as I do. Heath is also a fellow coach, so if he's got something that you're looking for, please go check him out, go follow him, sign up for his coaching, and now enjoy my conversation with Heath Treasure. Heath, behind you on the wall is a big sign that says Ultimate Blue Collar. That's obviously your brand, but I want you to tell me, what does that mean?
So Ultimate Blue Collar is our brand. It's our business. Some people think it's a clothing line. It's not a clothing line. It's our brand. It's our business. But I've owned multiple blue collar businesses. I made all my money in blue collar space. I was a truck driver for a living. Drove one truck and grew my business to be a multi-million-dollar business. And I'll kind of walk you down that journey a little bit. But when I sold my biggest blue collar portfolio company, which was a big truck line, a multi-million-dollar truck line, I sold it to Red Bull, a Red Bull owned company. And I was being interviewed once, and the person interviewing said, so you're like the ultimate blue collar millionaire. And it really resonated with me, because I feel like I'm the ultimate blue collar millionaire, and the people that work for me, they're the ultimate blue collar guys, and helping keep America moving. And all the other businesses, most of the other businesses that I own in my portfolio are blue collar businesses. And that's what I've made a lot of money on is in the blue collar space. So that's our brand and that's our business. We can talk a little bit more when you want to about what we're doing in the blue collar space if you'd like. But yeah, I can give you my story from the beginning, and as you want to interrupt me and ask as many questions. I'm an open book, man. I love to talk about hard work, dirty hands, dirty work boots, long days, long nights, all of it, and how it has transitioned to becoming a multimillionaire. And I think the world as we see it is about ready to make more multimillionaires within the blue collar space than it ever has in our country's history, in my opinion.
I think we're on the same verge of that rise, and I'm excited to talk about acquisitions with you a little bit and what that looks like with the baby boomers exiting and guys like you and I having this opportunity to really take off. But to kind of jump into your story a little bit, because you've used the word millionaire a couple times and money.
Yeah. Well, number one, let's start here. Let's start from the beginning of my career if you want to, and we can kind of talk about M&A and if that's the direction you want to go. But I'm a college dropout. I probably wasn't voted to be the most successful person in my graduating class, like many multimillionaires are. Went to college, dropped out of college, and came back, and I went to work for a family-owned truck line. And I got a job within the office, become a dispatcher in there. And I was dispatching, 50-year-old, I was 20 or 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds and 70-year-old truck drivers. And it was a very difficult job, and it taught me a lot of lessons about leading people and taking charge and asking people, getting people to do what you need them to do, getting drivers to do what you need to do. But I really didn't understand what they were going through and what they were doing fully. And so as time went on, I realized I needed more to make more money than what I was making at that dispatching job. So I started driving truck for the same company I was dispatching for on the weekends. And I dispatched all week so I could be home with my family. I left on Friday and I went from Idaho to Long Beach, California in a semi truck. I mean, I think I maybe had 100 miles of training, and then I took my first load to Long Beach, California, and I would do that every weekend. There was many periods of my life where I worked 7 days a week. I'd dispatch all week, and then I would drive truck to Long Beach, California, and I did that to make extra money. But what I learned is that it helped my job in the office, and it helped it so that I could dispatch and ask people to win and to meet extraordinary goals because I understood what they were going through. And now all of a sudden, I'm learning how to be a leader, but I'm being a leader by doing things that I've done or that they've done and they've gone through. And then as time went on, after a few years, I took a quick pit stop, and this is another lifelong lesson. All of my buddies at the time were making hundreds of thousands of dollars, a lot more money than me, by building spec homes because the housing market was just booming. And when I was in high school, I had worked on a construction crew and I knew how to do that. So I jumped out of the trucking business where all my skills were. I knew how to drive. I knew how to dispatch. I knew how the engine worked. I knew everything about that industry, but it just wasn't quite good enough for me. And so I went out into the construction business, and I became a millionaire in my mid-20s. And I thought that I had the world by the horns. I thought I had made the best decision of my life. I was going on a vacation on a Disney cruise with my family, and I was flying back home. And on the way back home, we were looking at what next vacation we were going to go on. And I was ordering pickups and building new houses for myself. And I was in a position where the amount of money that I was making in the construction business was probably more money than you'd want most 25-year-olds to be managing. And before you know it, the housing market crashed. And as quick as I became a millionaire in my mid-20s, in my late 20s, I lost it all. And it was a very public, I went broke in a very public environment just because when I was in a small rural community, when I started making more and more and more money, I was public then as well. And, a lot of it was because the amount of money and the lifestyle that I was living was definitely something that would probably be talked about amongst most people. People knew me in the area. They knew I was donating a lot of money to school programs, all the things that you do when you become young and super wealthy. And long story short, I lost everything in my late 20s. And the only thing I knew what to do is drive truck. And so I got in one truck and I started driving truck, and I would drive for days and days on end. I mean, I'm recovering from being broke. It took several months to recover my brain to get to the point where I felt like I wasn't a loser. I thought I had the world by the horns, and now all of a sudden I realized I didn't quite have the world by the horns. And all I wanted to do in my life was become a successful business owner. And I think I had a lot of respect from a lot of people, and because of what I did in a very short period of time. And then like that, it's gone. And so I had no choice but to put my gloves on, put my work boots on, and I got in a semi truck and I went to work. I drove truck in the oil fields for a little while, and then I drove truck every week to Idaho to Indianapolis and back, hauling product out there and product back. There was sometimes I'd be on the road for 7-8 days straight with maybe a half a day off, and then back on the road driving truck again. And I was trying to drive truck and climb myself out of being broke 1 mile at a time. And that's a very difficult position to be in when at one point in time not too distant back, you were flying first class and on a vacation all the time, brand new cars and everything else. And so, I had to try to find the mental capacity to rebuild my mind, rebuild my own confidence back inside myself, and to try to rise from the ashes 1 mile at a time. And some days I'd drive because I got paid by how much production I could do during the week, and I would drive, all day one day and through the night the next night and through the next day and into a piece of the next night without any sleep. And I remember thinking one time when I was trying to climb out of that position, that I see these people as I go through different communities. As I'm driving out east to Indiana, I'd see these people rise in the mornings and they'd head off to work and they'd have kids in their car they were taking to school. And then I'd see more traffic at lunchtime as I was continuing down the highway, and then more traffic in the afternoon time as I was continuing down the highway. And I'd see these people and they were waking up and they were living their life. And then about 7, 8 o'clock at night, as I keep going, the traffic started to die down. And here pretty soon, as I get a little deeper into the night, the traffic got almost to nothing. And you'd see lights on inside people's houses that you could see from the freeway. And then here pretty soon, a little later, there was no lights other than a porch light. And I remember thinking that in order for me to ever become successful again, not only did I need to repair my mental state of mind, but I needed to steal those people's souls that were sleeping. And I needed to work. I needed to pass their houses when they're at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and in their bed. And if I continue to work while they're sleeping or while they're doing things besides working, that I will slowly climb out of this. And that, a lot of hard work, a lot of dirty t-shirts, a lot of dirty clothes, a lot of showers and truck stops. I eventually started to climb out of it, and one truck went to 2 trucks and then 3 trucks. And there's a lot of lessons learned throughout that story. But the synopsis of the story is I grew that experience when I was still in the souls of those people into hundreds of trucks. And at one time we had trucks in every state across the United States hauling freight. You'd see it up on our dispatch board where you'd see all of our trucks across the United States hauling for all the Fortune 500 customers. And we grew it to a multi-million-dollar empire. And along the way, I would pick up other blue-collar businesses that gave support, like fleet maintenance facilities and fleet dealerships that we bought equipment from. I would add them to my portfolio. And I ended up selling the business to a Red Bull-owned company, like I mentioned earlier, for a multi-million-dollar exit. And I'm very passionate about the blue-collar space. There are so many tradesmen out there. I know because I used to work with a lot of them when I was in the construction business. And then I worked with a lot of diesel technicians and truck drivers and warehouse people. And there's a lot of people in blue-collar space that don't realize that they have a platform to grow on and to really turn into something special if they get their mind right. And I made a lot of money by owning that business. But when I sit down, that business and various others, but when I sit down, and I sat down after I sold, I really meditated about where are the notches along my journey where I made the most amount of money, not the operating the business, the areas where I made the most amount of money. And if you really want to know the really deep details, I made the most amount of money when I was acquiring other truck lines and other blue collar businesses and bringing them in, and then getting them ready to be exited, and then selling my business. So, a good hardworking blue collar worker or a business owner, he could probably make enough money by hard work, smart decisions, grinding out to eat a fillet, right? But what I like to say is, if you buy businesses right and you sell them right, you're going to set yourself up to eat a fillet for the rest of your life. The biggest amount of money I ever made was when I was buying businesses, bringing them into the portfolio, doing what we do to them, scaling them, and then ultimately on the exit to that Red Bull owned company. And the other thing I learned, which was so many of these blue collar business owners that are successful in their own right, many of them were millionaires or they live at a good income. When I would come to buy their business, I would realize that they were really good at running and operating their business, but not so good at selling their business and getting it ready to be sold. And therefore, there were buys out there, and I was able to buy businesses for buys and really scale them and sell them because I understood the process because I had a lot of practice doing it in buying and scaling and selling. And so we really preach at Ultimate Blue Collar through our coaching business and our group coaching. We really preach the whole idea of, number one, pivot from an employee to an owner. We want everybody to do that because we see there's a good opportunity there. And then number two, you need to immediately start thinking, how can I make sure that as I build and grow this business, that it's a sellable asset? And there are a lot of people in the blue collar space that are grinding it out, wearing their gloves, making a lot of money, but they haven't really thought too much on, is this a sellable asset and what's it worth and what do I need to do to make sure that it's worth? So if you do that, we believe it's a family tree game changer. But to have one wealthy guy running a blue collar business, and then all of a sudden he dies and his business wasn't worth anything, there was no momentum in changing the dynamic of that family tree. Mm-hmm. But if you can build it, scale it, make sure it's an asset, have a really properly orchestrated exit, then you can leave enough money on the table for you to enjoy future investments or retirement, or your family can enjoy different things. That was a whole mouthful. That's kind of my story. Hopefully you have some questions I'd love to answer.
I've got questions for sure. One being through the rise and fall.
That's embarrassing.
It's okay. Through the rise and fall of your 20s, how did that mature your relationship with money?
Listen, it did a lot of it at the time of it happening. I thought it was the end of the world. And I used to have discussions with myself, especially when I was driving truck, that given another opportunity to make that amount of money, I will be very careful with what I'm spending it on. With that being said, I'm not a believer in, I'm a one generation wealthy guy in my family, right? I'm the first generation super wealthy guy. And I'm a believer that saving is your first step to losing. And so what it taught me, to be quite honest with you, is it taught me that losing it all wasn't that bad. At the end of the day, you have to risk if you want to grow. And it doesn't matter if it's with money. It doesn't matter if you're starting a new business or you're an athlete or whatever else. You have to be willing to take the risks and not have that much fear. And before I lost it all, I had a lot of fear. And then once I lost it all, I realized, you know what, it wasn't that bad. And if I had to, I could do it again. So as I was building and scaling my truck line, the risks were significant, probably more significant than most people would take. But most people haven't felt the worst of the worst like I have. And so I think you need to be smart with money. You need to be very calibrated and cautious. The one piece of advice I give any businessman that's starting to find some success is the best investment is yourself and your own business. As you start getting more money, everybody's coming at you and they want you to invest in this and this and this and this. But in reality, if you own an electrical business, you should invest in growing your electrical business. And I learned that from scaling my truck line. Any investment that I wanted to make, it needed to be something that helped out the truck line, or something that was my idea that I had full control of. So money is something that I think people get really fixated on because it buys a particular lifestyle that looks really glamorous, right? And it just happens to be the scoreboard in business. And I hate to fixate on money, but until somebody else creates a different scoreboard, um, that's what you have to do. You measure if your business is winning based on how much money you're producing, and then you have to continue to take risks and to grow it, because if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward.
Mhm.
And so that was a long answer for a
Mhm.
short question, but the biggest takeaway is you have to risk. If you're going to develop, you have to continue to risk. And so that's exactly what I did. And so far
Yep.
it's worked out fairly well for me.
Do you think that fear of taking risk is one of the biggest limiters in success and especially like growing businesses or teams?
I think I think that fear contributes to one of the limitations of people growing teams and scaling their businesses. But I'd like to loop fear into the lack of proper mindset development. And I think that, by losing everything, I had no choice sitting in that truck, developing my mindset in a fashion that it would take for me to start over again. And, you know, you look over the edge of the cliff to jump off, and there's so many bad thoughts about what's going to happen if it doesn't quite land, if you don't land right, or or whatever else. But when you're pushed off, like I was, when I lost everything, and then you land, and then you realize, hey, that wasn't that bad. Let's brush ourselves up and let's grind it out. It's going to be hard work. Let's grind it out and continue to take jumps when we need to take jumps. But mindset, I loop fear into mindset,
Mhm.
and I always say there are some basic skills that every blue collar or tradesman worker should develop that won't cost that much money before they pull the trigger on launching their blue collar business. And one of them is skills within a trade, right? I jumped into a trade where I didn't have the best skills developed. What happened? I lost it all. I went back into a trade where I happen to have a lot of skills. So develop skills within a trade and stick to it, because you become an expert the more you stick to that skill
Mhm.
set. You have to develop your mindset skills, right? You have to have mindset skills. And then the other two skills that I believe are, you have to be able to communicate with people, and you have to be a good salesman. I don't care what business you're in, whether you're an electrician or a plumber, or you're going to own a trucking company, or you're an iron worker, or whatever it is. all the Typically the only way for you to generate revenue within your organization is through sales, right?
Mhm.
And however those sales streams comes to you, you have to be able to communicate with people, and you have to be able to sell
Mhm.
people on your services. So those are some key skills that I would recommend every incoming blue collar entrepreneur should develop. And I happened to be very good at some of those skills and not so good at some of the others, but I recognized it, and I worked on books on tape and
Mhm.
listening and developing those skills so that I was ready when I got my second time around.
I think that the ability to sell is also a reflection of the mindset. And what I mean by that is if you don't think you're worth it, you're not going to sell it. And if you devalue yourself and you devalue your services, you're not going to sell. You're just going to put a price on the table and take orders.
Yeah.
So I like those basic skill sets that you have laid out, and I call them basic. A lot of organization call them soft skills, but they're not soft skills anymore. They're necessary skills. And if you can't communicate and you can't sell, you don't need you don't need to be in that position. That's
Yeah.
that's just that's just the reality. You're putting a limit on yourself. So Now, I do want to circle back to the mindset thing because the people that I get to interact with, Heath, and the successful people that I've got to meet, one consistency that I see among successful people is how they speak to themselves during and after failure. What was that narrative like for you coming out of, you know, winning and then losing and then trying to recreate your identity and redevelop a path? What was that internal narrative like?
Well, it was the first time in my life that I had ever felt poorly about myself. Look, that I've always had to overcome challenges. In school, I was ADD and I was getting in trouble all the time. But even though I had, the cards stacked against me in that space, I always found a way to find something positive and some way to not feel so poorly about myself. When losing it all, it was the first time in my life I really felt like there maybe wasn't that much that I should be proud of, you know. And so I'll tell you, and I'm just being honest to you, the thing that really drove me back to work wasn't, can I develop something that I can be proud of? Can I climb out of this? But it was survival. I had some young kids, and then as I started getting to the point where I could survive, your mind starts saying, "Well, at least I can provide for my family now." And so you start to rebuild these blocks of feelings of who you are and what you can do, because now I don't need to go ask for help for anybody. At least I can provide for my family. And then you hire somebody else, and you're like, now I can help create a platform for two families to be provided off of my business. And then you get a little bit more confident and a little bit more confident. But I think so many people uh, work so hard to find them, or work hard to stay in a space of negativity and low self worth. It's a journeyman electrician that would love to have his own business, but he feels like he doesn't have what the business owner has. And the only recommendation that I would have is, that's not so. I guarantee there's at least something that that business owner doesn't have that you have, and you need to identify that, and you need to make sure that you're starting to take notes, and in your head or in a notebook, of all the things he doesn't have and he's successful that you think you have, or you think you can develop. And here pretty soon you start to have a big enough list of items that you think you have that he doesn't have. And I did this very same thing when I was rising from being broke, is I started identifying things that the successful truck line owners didn't have that I have, whether it was working with people, whether it was being able to communicate, whether it was work ethic, whatever it was. I had these things listed down. And here pretty soon it gets easier and easier to create positive thoughts. And as you create more positive thoughts, because of all this energy, all these things you've written down that you do better than maybe somebody else that's successful, it helps you get to the point of confidence that you're ready to make that pivot, because now there's way more things that you can do better, you think you are doing better than him. And then I use an electrician, if you're an electrician, maybe you'll see, a lot of employees in their head might say, if the boss would just listen to me and he would string his Romex this way, I think it would save him a little bit of money, but he won't listen to me. Okay, well, that's something to write down. Is I've got some ideas here how to save money on this business that he's too fixated and he won't listen to. And that's a long answer for a short question, but the only way I redevelop my strength and my mental strength is starting to jot down and identify things that I felt like I could do better than the people that were in my industry owning businesses.
I think that's a good strategy because we live in a society of comparison today. And when you do that, it only amplifies your own weaknesses. And people do, they get hung up on their weaknesses, and that becomes their identity and their story. And then it's, I can't, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not this. Being able to step back and identify, what is your zone of genius? What are your strengths? What ideas do you have? And then how can you structure those, strategize those, build on those, develop those, breathe life into those. And then all of the sudden you have something that is valuable to the market,
Yep.
valuable to the team, valuable to your client. And just because you're not doing it the same way doesn't mean that it's wrong. We did that with my HVAC company. I looked at the market and I went, okay, this is what everybody else is doing. And we kind of went the opposite direction with customer experience, appearance, communication, sales, all the stuff that you're talking about. And it escalated us in the market so quickly because we were just different than
Yep.
everybody else. So I think I like that you had the mental fortitude to detach yourself from the loss, not allow the failure to become your identity. And I think a lot of people make that mistake too, because they lose one time. That's now their identity and that's their story. And that's the story they carry with themselves forever. Uh,
Yep.
the other part of that I think is important for people to know that are experiencing failure is when you hit the bottom, sometimes you have to walk the bottom to find a way out. You can't
Yeah.
just stand there and look up and say, hopefully someone discovers me. Like you've got to walk that bottom for a while until you can discover a way to get out of there. So,
Well, I'll tell you, I made this comment when I was on another podcast as well, when this was all happening, in the 2000s, 2005, 6-ish, I want to say 7-ish, maybe. Um, there wasn't a lot of, online coaches or podcasts or things that you could listen to and to help you get your mind right, to help you unfuck yourself, right?
mhm,
Let's just say
mhm,
that. I mean, if you can't think of one, you want to be your own businessman, you can't think of one thing that you think you can do better than what your competitors are, or the skills that you think you have more than some of the other business owners. We need to go back to a couple steps backwards, and you need to unfuck yourself. And there's so many ways to do that in this generation, and there wasn't a lot when I was going through it.
mhm.
There's podcasts you can listen to. There's guys like you, guys like me that have done it, that we've been through hard times. We wondered how we were going to make payroll, right? And you go and you listen to these guys and you think, you know what, this guy's just like me. He puts his pants on the same way as I do every morning, right? One leg at a time.
Mhm.
And he goes out and he just grinds it out. And I don't think he has the same skills that I have. So number one is there is so much out there in today's age to help you unfuck yourself. And there wasn't when I was. There was only one successful businessman that I could find at the time, and maybe there was, but one that I could find easily at the time who had went broke and became a very wealthy man again, and that was Donald Trump. I know anybody knows his story. He lost everything in New Jersey, and I didn't really know much about him or what he did or any of his political views or whatever. But that's all I needed to hear was that one guy had done it once. He'd lost everything, and now he's on his own private jet again. I could do that.
Mhm.
And sure enough, I went from one truck to multiple to my own private jet to my own helicopter. And I did it one day at a time, developing one skill at a time, and working really hard with the mindset that if somebody else can do it, I can do it.
One of the things I see, this is going to lead to a question, is the business owners often are the ceiling of the business, is the limiting factor because they feel that they need to do the work. They don't trust someone else to do the work. It's not the way that they do it. They can't find good help. All the same bullshit that we hear. I'm interested in how you help someone change their mindset and recognizing how to define the role that they need to play in the company and ultimately to get the fuck out of the way so the business can grow and the people can
Yeah.
grow.
Well, it's very hard. That's another pivot you got to make, right? You make a pivot up from being a worker to being a business owner. And then you got to make a pivot from working in the business. You've heard the analogy. You got to make a pivot from working in the business to working on the business. But I'll make this analogy is there's very few professional athletes that are successful winning sports teams, basketball teams, whatever else it is, that doesn't have a team, right? They have to have a team surrounding them, because they just wouldn't be there, and they wouldn't be at the top of the top unless they had a team. And what do you find usually at the top of those teams? You find an owner, then you find a really good general manager, and then you find a really good coach. And these people are all people that teach and help and identify and envision strategy. And there's so many business owners that know how to make the money by putting in the hard work, but aren't experts at teaching. So we talked about the soft skills. Now we got to talk about some of the other skills, which are leadership skills. Are you good at teaching? Are you good at motivating? Right? Are you good at envisioning solutions? Right? Because what I found is, the more I practice these things, and the more I taught these things to the people that were helping me build my business, then they got to be really good at those things. And in fact, many of the people, the executive staff and employees at the truck line that I sold to the Red Bull owned company, were better than me at envisioning solutions. And so there's skill sets that you will have to develop on top of the specific trade you're learning. There are skill sets that you will have to develop throughout your journey. And you're right, there are a lot of business owners that can't develop that skill set. And so that's why I'm here to say that, those are the guys that are going to sell their blue collar businesses for less money, and they're going to sell it to guys that can take it and scale it and build on it, and that do have the other skills developed. And the guys that they sell it to are going to end up selling it for a lot more money. So if you're going to own a business, you really need to understand how to make the pivot to working on it rather than in it.
And owning a business instead of owning a job or just being employed.
Yeah.
And I think creating that mindfulness and that awareness for a lot of people is really one of the pivots. If they're already in an ownership role, that they realize that they do own a job. It's feedback I get a lot. Hey, I recognize I own a job. I haven't done anything in the last 3 years. We've not scaled, we've not grown, we've not been profitable, we've not been able to hire. And it's because they're playing the wrong role in the business
Yeah.
ultimately. And they're suffering from leadership captivity. They're suffering from, again, owning a job, and then everything in that business, they are everything in that business.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the most limiting aspect of a business, is when everything about you is the business and is the company.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think people recognizing that is part of the maturity. But the reason I asked that question, Heath, was a lot of times when people do have that awareness, now they're standing there going, "What do I do now?"
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, again, back to my point where, if you're a business owner that that's stuck in the mud, you've got more options
Mhm.
now than you ever have before. Obviously, I don't know if you do any coaching, but obviously there are business coaches and mentors out there. And some people might think there are more mentors coming to the table now than ever in the world before, and they might get annoyed by it. I actually love it. You're hearing it from a multimillionaire. I love it, right? Because different coaches, different mentors, different podcasts, they resonate differently with different people.
Mhm.
And then not only that, they resonate differently with different people at different times of your journey, right? So you might want you as a coach for this point in your journey. Somebody might want me as a coach, or someone to listen to at a different part of their journey. But I truly believe, and I've said this before, that with the tools we have out there available today, I could have accelerated the zeros in my checking account, maybe by 40%, 30%, because when I would have those weeks where I just wanted to bounce something off of somebody, or I was stuck in the mud, or I couldn't quite, I knew what I needed to do to pivot, right, from
Mhm.
working on the business to in the business, and I knew what I had to do, but I couldn't do it. There were weeks that I'd have an idea of how to do it, but then the end of the week came and I never could do it. And now you've got people that will listen to you, that can coach you and say, open up your mind, or a podcast even. Open
Mhm.
up your mind and say, think about this, or think about this, or this has worked for me. I don't know if it'll work for you, but think about this. And that didn't exist 10 years ago.
No, I I I am a coach. I do my focus is leadership and operations. That's my zone of genius. And
Perfect.
I was doing a leadership training last week, and I explained to the team that was there because they have everybody gets a workbook, and I tell them, I said, yeah, "You're going to start with a workbook. You're going to leave with a playbook, but ultimately, what I'm giving you are tools." And it is your responsibility to learn how to effectively use these tools. I'm going to teach you what they are and I'm going to teach you how to use them, but it's up to you to continue to get better using those tools.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so many blue collar business owners, their identity is wrapped up in the trade or the craft itself and not the ability to lead people or scale a business or market or sale.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of different analogies. If you really look at it, I don't know if any of your viewers watch NASCAR, and I watch it a little bit here and there, but all those cars are spec. You know, they're supposed to be within range of a particular spec, but you've got certain cars that win the race and certain cars that don't win the race. And I want to challenge you and your viewers by saying the ones that are winning the race are the ones that have the mindset that even though their specs are similar to the other specs, there's still more that they can work on. And there's still more that they can do within the parameters of NASCAR
Mhm.
specs to win the race. And if they didn't have that mindset, they wouldn't be winning the races, right? And so the key is to never believe that you're out of options of things that you can work on, you know, whatever it might be, to continue to expand your business. I never ran out ever on any of my businesses of things that we could do to improve them or make them better or make them exit ready or make them assets. There's always things that you can do. And obviously, I don't know if that's a good analogy, but I
Mhm.
use that sometimes.
Mhm. Oh,
It's
I
powerful to
yeah.
me.
I think it's a great analogy. The reason is if you're if you're an HVAC guy, and as you see, yeah, I've got, gauges hanging on the wall.
Yeah, I see that.
If you're an HVAC guy, all HVAC companies fix air conditioners, right?
Yep.
So we all do the same thing,
Yep. And they work the
but
same way.
and they work the same way. It doesn't matter what brand is on it.
Yeah.
So it is a good analogy because how you approach it and the little things that you learn and do is what determines the success or the difference between, your business and somebody else's business. Our our success didn't come from our ability to fix air conditioners. It come from our ability to serve the client and to create the best experience for the client. That's where our success came from
Yep.
because people didn't want some crusty fuck in there that doesn't like his job bitching and
Yeah.
complaining about running another call or his employer. I recognize that because I had spent enough time with those people that if we come into your home and we create an experience, a positive experience where we engage with you, we communicate with you, you feel safe, we add value, that you're going to not only call us back, but everybody that you know is now going to call us. And that was just taking the same thing, the same car that everybody else was driving and going, how can we look at this a little bit differently? So I like that analogy, and I completely agree, and that's where I think people don't understand the importance of learning business and learning communication and learning sales because your ability to fix an air conditioner is not what grows your business.
Yeah.
It's not what pays the bills. It's
Yeah.
the problem you're solving, but the method in which you solve it is where the value is.
Yeah. And you would agree to this probably, that how good you are at creating processes and protocols really defines how well established your business is, or if your business is an asset. And, you know, I'd always say that um, buyers who are buying businesses, not to get off on a
Mhm.
tangent here, but you made me think about this. But buyers that are buying businesses, obviously they're going to look at the financial performance of your business. But I've seen buyers pay more money for a company that's performing less if they're good at processes, flows, and procedures. And just like you said, having some kind of special ingredient that's different than the
Mm-hmm.
other guy. And so you're absolutely right. It's the same things, the same fix. But maybe, your guys show up with a nice collared shirt on and they always explain it this way to the customer so the customers understand it better. And you've got different flows, processes, and procedures than just your Joe Blow guy coming out there. And that adds value to your business if you or your family is ever in a position where they need to sell it.
Mm-hmm. So let's transition into acquisitions a little bit and looking for business. And I'm going to do that by asking you this question. With today's current time, how do you look at starting a business from scratch versus buying an existing business?
If you're going to enter into the business world, you can't exclude either option, in my opinion. Now, I think buying a business and understanding and knowing how to buy it right will accelerate and catapult you to levels much quicker than if you start a business. But number one, you got to understand what you're buying. You can't buy a business that's going to put you in quicksand, right? That's going to
Mhm.
decelerate your growth. So you have to probably hire a coach or hire somebody that knows M&A, and you need to buy it right. But even I can tell you, if there's a particular industry that we want to be involved in, and we'll look to buy and look to buy and look to buy for the right fit. And if we can't find the right fit, we'll start. All right. So if you feel like you have the material to start, don't sit and wait on the bench until you can buy. Start and continue to look to buy. But I'm here to tell you that I believe that there will be more blue collar buy opportunities over the next decade, maybe 2 decades, than we've ever seen before with the baby boomers moving
Mhm.
on. And if you're smart about it, and you know how to buy the business, you probably can buy it for much cheaper than what you really realize. Maybe even with them carrying the note, maybe with you getting a bank loan for some of it and some other kind of creative financing. But there's not enough buyers buying the baby boomers out as there needs to be. But I've also bought businesses that are quicksand. So you have to, it's like, listen, when you're going to buy a business, I'm, I'm a pilot. I fly planes and helicopters. And this is what I like to tell people when they ask, when you're going to buy a business and you've never bought one before, it's like I'm asking you to hop in the cockpit of that jet airplane and fly us and land us safely. Would you do it? And the answer better be no.
Right.
And it's no difference if you're going to put your entire family's savings or your commitment to their future and your future on the line. Would you go jump in an airplane without some kind of coaching or training of somebody to teach you what's the lingo? What do I need to do first? What do I need to do second? If you do that, you can successfully acquire, and the money you spend for someone to teach you or train you will come back to you tenfold because you'll buy it right, you'll build it right, and you'll be able to exit right.
Mhm. What are some of the red flags that you've seen with quicksand businesses?
Good question. We talked about one in the podcast. You have a lot of businesses that you take the owner out of it, and that the owner's the glue that's holding it together. I wouldn't necessarily preclude that from being a one that you could buy, but it definitely devalues it. When you take that owner out, I think people underestimate how much damage that could do across the entire business, because now all of a sudden people are lost. Their leader's gone. They don't have anybody to go to solve their problems. And so a red flag to me is somebody that hasn't learned how to have leaders within their business, decision makers within their business beside the owner, right? That's a big red flag. You should watch. You should look at that very closely. You know, um, handwritten flows, processes, and procedures. That's a big thing, right? This is the 21st century. I say handwritten, it could be digital,
Right.
literature written processes, flows, and procedures. and that's a big dynamic. Um, but also, I think, it's not necessarily a red flag, but I think you should always look to buy in businesses that you or your business partner or somebody that knows you very good knows something about. If I was going to go buy a HVAC business, I'd go to somebody like you and say, "Hey, I'm looking at this business. You interested in coming on as a silent
Hmm.
partner?" Because then what you've done is you've hired a coach to coach you through that business. I wouldn't do it without having any knowledge in that trade.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I think people get the shiny object syndrome, and they fall in love with the idea of being able to acquire or purchase business, and that leads them blindly to understanding how the business operates and what they need to know about that business. The the owner one, I think that's interesting. I hadn't put too much thought effort into the owner because a lot of the baby boomer businesses are looking at retirement. So if if there is no systematic operation and there is no chain of communication and that individual is everything, then there's no business to buy. You can purchase the assets once it closes down, but there's no business to buy
Yeah.
there. And I think that's important to kind of differentiate those 2.
And that's why a good a coach or advisor can help you, because they can help you negotiate that deal to where maybe you know maybe you buy it, but a certain amount of the performance of the future performance of the business is tied to that purchase price, or a certain amount of involvement of the
Mhm.
outgoing owner is tied to the purchase price. Here's one that I should have mentioned and I didn't mention, but it's also culture. And it's the hardest one to measure, because you can ask any business owner you want about their culture, and I've yet to find one business owner tell me that their culture was bad,
Mhm.
right? Every business owner thinks they got a good culture in their organization no matter what, right? There is no specific definition of what a good culture is versus a bad culture. So you're going to have to try to identify what his culture is all about and see if that's something that can mesh in with you or the employees you intend on having. It's very difficult, but it's
Mhm.
something that you've got to think about. We bought businesses before with when a year later we didn't have any of their employees left, because even though he thought he had a good culture and I thought I had a good culture, the cultures were not in alignment at all, right? And so you got my recommendation for this is write down the things that you personally believe play into a good culture and see if they have it, because there is no good definition.
Mhm.
For example, do his HVAC technicians show up early and keep a clean vehicle? You know, do they at 4 o'clock are they gone? Can you not? Do they leave jobs in the middle of jobs? Is that a culture you want? Right? Are they willing to handle stress calmly, whatever the circumstance might be, whatever it is that you believe would be a good culture for your future business? You need to write them down and identify and see how his staff blends
Mhm.
into that mold.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. Culture is, to me, probably the most important fuel to operations. And if you've got a good culture, your operations flow good. But if you can have great systems and bad culture and it just doesn't work well.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that culture is such a magnifier, such an amplifier of the success of that business. Heath, talk to me about your coaching business and how you're helping people now get into this whole idea of buying businesses or building businesses.
Well, look, I'm passionate about blue collar, so I want to help anybody that wants to be involved in the blue collar space in any particular blue collar field that they're in. I want to help them make the pivot to business ownership. I want to help them make the pivot to working on the business rather than in the business. And I especially want to help them build an asset rather than a job. and get their asset ready at all times, even if they're not for sale. Always get it ready for an exit. Now, some of that coaching might not quite be in the budget of someone that's getting ready to get into business. They maybe don't have the budget for a veteran private coach. And so that's why we're launching the Blue Collar Union. There will be information coming on the Blue Collar Union, but that's a weekly group coaching community called the Blue Collar Union. There will be people from all different trades, and we'll teach all different aspects of what we believe you could use, whether it's how can I use AI within my business to scale it and grow it, setting up your organizational infrastructure, whatever it is will help coach in a group community like that. Or if you're already a successful businessman or a businessman that's well on your way and you want to have a little more private coaching on buying other businesses, scaling your business, or appropriately exiting your business, then you could book me or someone from my team up for private coaching as well.
Yeah,
And
that's exciting.
You can follow me at the Heath Treasure on Instagram. You can send messages to me on Instagram. It's Heath Treasure on TikTok, and we got YouTube as well. The Heath Treasure's got a website, and Ultimate Blue Collar also has a website as well. So either one of those, and you can send messages to us through any of those platforms and reach out to us and see how we maybe can help you.
Yeah. Let me tell you why I'm excited about that is being a lifelong blue collar uh, guy as well, and coming up through the ranks in the businesses and all of that kind of shit, and now coaching with people. I try to be very welcoming to other people that want to enter the coaching realm and
Sure.
be in the coaching realm because there is not near enough of us. There is not enough of us for what, especially what you said. And I also foresee the next decade, what is going to happen in the blue collar industries over the next decade is going to play such a vital role in the future because the market share is going to become available. It's becoming available every day. These businesses are closing, and there's so much good opportunity for people. And if we don't teach them how to acquire that or how to build these businesses, somebody else is.
Yep.
And to tell you the truth, Heath, I'm not interested in working for a company that's owned by BlackRock.
Yeah. Yep.
I want to be able to know the person I work with. I want to be able to
Yep.
call them up directly, on the phone and say, "Hey, man, I'm having this issue." So I'm grateful that you're in this arena of coaching, that you're willing to, you know, give yourself and your time and your resources and work with people and help them do that. And ultimately, dude, I'm pumped that you took the time out of your schedule to spend this with me and my listeners and share your story. And I'm really excited about how our conversations are going to go in the future.
I'm really excited as well. I want to leave your listeners with one comment, and it's a question really for them. And what I want everybody to think about, and I've said this before, is when is the last time you've seen a championship, a Super Bowl winning football team win a championship without a coach,
Mhm.
right? Every professional sports team in every league has a coach, right? And so when people say there's a lot of people getting into the coaching business, well, I believe any business that wants to win, any business that wants to grow, any business that wants to succeed should have a coach. So telling off what you said, we don't have enough coaches that have been there, done that, and willing to teach it. And so I'm a big believer in having a coach. Even I have a coach.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree. And the thing that I respect is your authenticity and relatability. I always make the joke that the blue collar industry is the biggest blood in, blood out gang in the world. And when you stand somebody up in front of us to teach us something, if they don't have scars, bruises, and they don't come from the same shit that we come from, there's not a great appreciation there.
Right.
It just is. It's
Yep.
it's just part of our culture, and it's how we operate. So the fact that you also, have come up through the trades and through business and through leadership, to me makes you infinitely more valuable. And that for me, it's one of my I don't know. It's just something that I greatly respect
Yeah.
about what you're doing and who you are. So I
Likewise.
appreciate you for that.
Likewise. I'm excited for more collaboration,
Mhm.
and anywhere I can help you, or vice versa, let's reach out and stay in touch. Thanks for having us on your show.
Man, thanks, Heath, for being here. Guys, go find him on his platforms. It will be in the show notes. Until next time, get shit done.